One of the reasons why I was so excited to do an episode on tango fails is because I personally have so many, and I know that other dancers experience failure or fails in different parts of their dance. But what I didn't expect was that I actually was going to have to live through the failure as part of the process of making this episode, because the whole episode was a near fail for reasons that we couldn't have controlled. And I have to say, I have never had to work so hard on an episode since I started this podcast. The audio for the episode got corrupted. And so I wanted to give a little intro and preface the episode by explaining why sometimes it sounds a little choppy, or certain parts of the episode seem like they're a little bit more abrupt. So I apologize in advance if this seems a little bit confusing. There were times that I wasn't certain this episode was actually going to make it, but because fails was the idea, I found it kind of funny that part of this process of bringing this episode to light was actually me living with so many fails of the creative process that this episode required. Now, one of the fails we talk about with Alex in this podcast is the whole fail of stepping on somebody's foot, and that happens a lot of times at marathons. So you'll hear me talk about how at every marathon or festival, I see at least one or two people who are having to deal with bleeding toes and torn off toenails. The moment where I explain that this takes place as a marathon was one of the audio moments that couldn't be salvaged. So when you hear me talk about bleeding toenails every time I go somewhere, it's me referring to going to a tango marathon or a festival. Now, speaking of marathons, I will be DJing at one very soon. The LA Summer Tango Marathon 2024 is coming up May 23rd through 27th, and I will be DJing a partially alternative set on Sunday, May 26th from 1 to 5 p.m. So if you're planning to attend, would love to hear from you. Come by and say hello. Now, lastly, before we launch into this episode, I'll mention that at the end of the month, on May 31st, which is a Friday, I will be doing an online webinar called How to Use Musicality to Get Better Dances. If you are a beginner in tango and you're curious about music, you don't know much, or you've been dancing for a little bit and you know some vocabulary, but you're a little confused how to now apply musicality to your dance, or if you've been dancing for some time and you know some things about the music, but they're kind of conflicting information and you don't really know what you really need to know, this class will be perfect for you. I provide you with my best essential tips that have worked for me and for lots of my students. And for those of you who've been eager to study with me, and I get so many messages about people being disappointed that I don't live closer. Well, this is one way that you can take advantage of working with me remotely. If you're interested to learn more about this class, the information is in the show notes, so follow that link. And I know that Friday is a difficult day for many people to attend live, but just know that you will have access to the recording of the class, as well as all of the materials that come with it on a personal dashboard that you'll be able to access afterwards and review as much as you want. So check it out. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you enjoy this possibly most successful and most failed attempt at an episode. Enjoy.
It's too full.
The resonance wasn't quite there.
One more time. This is the Redux, but I tried with mezcal this time. It's the same one as that Austin one, basically just a coffee, Namaro coffee, Bailey's or Irish cream liqueur, and then some mezcal instead of vodka, and espresso and half and half.
It's quite decadent.
Yeah, put a little Mexican chocolate on top of mine.
Yes, yes. And if our listeners are curious to see this recipe, it's actually posted on my Instagram account. We'll link that in the show notes. So if you want to find out exactly how to make it, you can look up the recipe. I'm very excited about our topic today. I don't know why I have never thought about doing this.
Because you focus on the positive, honey. Because today we're talking about tango fails.
Tango fails. Yes, tango fails. And I'm really curious to find out what made you think of this topic.
I think I was watching a couple of performance videos and I was curious, what happens when like somebody messes up during a performance? Like,
I mean, there are those fears that people have about failing on the dance floor. I know that when I used to dance in heels a lot, that was one of the things that was really nerve-wracking, especially at first when you start dancing in heels. It's so stressful, and the fear. I just have this image of Naomi Campbell losing balance on the runway and her legs folding underneath her, and she makes it look so graceful. But I just know if that happened to me, it'd probably be a lot less of a swan dive and more of like a total disaster.
Yeah,
and
ensemble.
Yeah, it's so I think everybody's kind of afraid of those kinds of things happening.
Sure. Yeah. I was like, have I dropped my partner? And I think I had almost tried to block it out, but I know that I have seen a horizon and then at some point realized that horizon is perpendicular to me. And I was on the floor on top of my partner.
No way. Okay, we need deets. When and where did this occur?
Well, it was the school that I used to go to.
Okay.
And
so you're very much of a student. You're learning.
Yeah. I was a beginner.
Gotcha.
Very much a beginner at this point. And I think it was at a practica, and we were dancing, and I can't remember too many specifics about anything that we were doing, but I just remember that at some point she kind of lost her balance, and I lost my balance, and like went out into a push-up, but I was like on top of her.
Wow.
And just tried to like kind of like do it as gracefully as possible, but we were headed towards the floor. There was nothing.
You were 100% on the floor.
Yeah.
It wasn't just almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully I don't think I've ever experienced that. I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
Like I remember I was dancing in Boise, I think, and it was just a little milonga, and I was dancing with somebody, and all of a sudden I hear this crash. And I look over and this woman's down, like she's just all the way down. And I think she like fainted or something.
Oh.
And it was like, it was really,
good.
It was that good. It was really interesting. So, people rushed to her aid and she kind of came to, but then she like got up and kept dancing. I kind of got the sense that maybe it's happened before and that's just something that she dealt with, like loss of balance. And I know some people, they just kind of live with it.
Yeah,
they lose balance. They got, whatever issues, and it's just part of their experience. So it might not be as big of a deal as we make it out to be, but it's terrifying because when it happens, it's very embarrassing.
No, yeah, I didn't see her back for a while. I think she was probably a little, mortified too. Probably the right word.
Maybe it's reminding me because I've just rewatched Mean Girls, the embarrassing moment of the movie. She falls, and it's a very, not a very graceful fall, and everybody likes taking pictures and spreading it online. And I think the scene on purpose kind of gives us the cringest possibility that you might experience. And I think in some ways when we are dancing tango, we can feel that way. Like we're so embarrassed about the possibility that we might lose balance or look a certain way or be.
I dropped my partner. I mean, who's going to dance with me now? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. I think it's tangible enough that I've like discussed it with other guys. It's like a kind of a fear that we have. But I haven't seen it that often. But I feel like I wonder, does everybody have like a tango fall story? It's a contact sport.
It is a contact sport. And I feel like I frequently, when I'm looking out at the dance floor, there's some couples, the way they dance, I sort of hold my breath a little bit because I'm like expecting something to happen, especially if it's, you know, that kind of dancer is super flashy and there's a lot of baleos going on and they're like in the middle of the dance floor and then they're like doing dips and lifts and you can tell that their mechanics are not, you know, quite the best. So you're sort of afraid for the follower a lot of times.
What kind of mistakes, what level of mistakes have you seen in performances?
I gotta say, and I'm curious if our listeners have more to add to this, but I feel like the most common fail that I see on the dance floor is when it involves women's attire, like their dresses, where it gets caught on their heel.
I see. Right.
And I mean, that happens a lot, it seems. And I've done that myself. Like I've danced in things when I used to wear heels, I would, you know, experience that heel getting caught in my dress. And then there's that panic, like, oh my God, I'm going to lose balance because my foot is not available.
Yeah. And that might, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the most common way that a fall happens, because
it's because of women's dresses.
Yeah. the foot getting caught on a tire.
Yeah.
Because usually you can somehow get your other foot under you. But if your foot's caught, that's the quickest way to not being able to get anything under you.
I've seen some performances like that with Ariadna Naveda, which seems like for a while, every time she performed, her foot would get caught. It was like her signature or something. And every time she was able to just make it part of the dance. Her partner, Fernanda, kind of has to wait for her. Mm-hmm. She's like, she's doing this beautiful movement with her foot, trying to like get it free from the dress, and it's not happening. And he's just kind of waiting for her. And it's, you know, becomes part of that sort of the choreography in the moment, which is kind of cool.
Totally. Yeah.
So in a way,
I mean, that's just, the crowd's going to love that.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, the skill is to accept the fail and make it part of the dance. Right. Ultimately, I think as you get more and more experience and you have so many near falls, like there's sometimes that I dance with somebody as a leader, and you know, I have this experience of like, oh my God, I'm going to crash into someone right now. I'm going to fall.
I've like done an ocho cortado like into the wall and then kind of like
make it part of the dance.
Moved my elbow into the wall to kind of like rebound off it a little bit.
That's an interesting aspect.
Yeah, and with other dancers too. Although, you know, the other dancers, sometimes I'm not sure if you know, any kind of contact is received by another couple as an intrusion on their space versus like just a fun acceptance of, look, it's a crowded dance floor, like there's going to be a little bit of contact. No big deal.
Now there's other kinds of fail, I think, that can result not from like physical things that happen in the dance, but things that might happen with other people on the dance floor. Not following the proper navigation technique, right? Like you step in and you don't make eye contact with the person behind you. Mm-hmm. Or you step in, you don't look behind you, the other person walks into you, and then their partner steps on your foot, and then there's injury, which that's something that happened to me recently. And that kind of fail, I think, happens more often. Yeah. And it's, you know, we don't have a proper protocol of what to do when that happens.
Yeah.
But, you know.
I don't think I've ever made somebody bleed from stepping on their foot. But recently I had like like I stepped right on my partner's foot right at the end of the song. And I remember it was with quite a bit of force, but I think fortunately it wasn't in that way where I like hit her toenail. I stepped on her foot, and I think it was distributed enough that it wasn't a big deal. She didn't even like grimace. Like that's the thing. Like you see a grimace in your partner's face. That's the indicator. But yeah, like have you ever like chipped somebody's toe or made it bleed or like
I haven't, but that's happened to me early on. Like I've had that. I actually remember one of the first defining experiences at the Milonga was that I was actually sitting and somebody walked into me and like blood was drawn. Wow. It was, and I was like, I'm not even dancing. What in the world? So
how did blood get drawn? It was
the person's heel, like, so the woman's heel, and she just walked into my foot. I was sitting and my foot was in her line of her line of movement. Like that happened at least one or two every time I go dance. Somebody is, oh yeah.
That often?
Oh, it's kind of, yeah, I expect I'm going to see someone who's like wrapping their foot, putting bandages on because their foot is bruised or bleeding, or they have to stop dancing because somebody stepped on their foot.
I guess I don't register.
It doesn't happen to leaders.
Yeah. Right. I got these closed toe shoes.
I know. I mean, that's why I love wearing my flats, because typically it's very rare for me to get hurt, which I did because the last time was because the leader walked their follower into my foot so that their heel stepped in the center on top of my foot. Yeah, it happens really often, I think. But not as often as it could, honestly, because there's so many close calls. Like, I've had it happen where I'm dancing in a pair of flat shoes and a woman's heel goes inside my shoe in the space between the shoe and my foot.
It's fully wrapped around. And so, like, however high the shoe goes up the ankle, you feel the stiletto go inside that part.
Yeah, and granted, I wasn't wearing my my booties that go above the ankle, so it was just a normal shoe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like that. Gotcha. That kind of thing happens, and those kinds of things happen all the time. So many near fails.
Yeah.
And so the ones that do happen are sort of understandable because honestly, it's kind of wild that we're expecting.
It's kind of amazing that doesn't happen anymore. Like. Sometimes when I'm dancing, if I'm looking kind of over my partner and I'm kind of looking down, there's so many times when I'm like, like I might let out an audible gasp because I'm sure disaster is about to happen, and the foot just moves, right? Because it's not where the puck is, it's like where it's going to.
This was maybe like a couple of years ago. I remember saying, I like leading, especially when I lead at home and I practice, but I get stressed out on the Milonga floor still. And I just can't access the same creative juice on the social dance floor because there's just so many people. And I remember her saying, oh, that's my favorite part. And somehow I was like, whoa, that can be a favorite part? Like somebody can actually enjoy this?
Yeah.
So that kind of struck my curiosity. So I one day was dancing and just sort of realized like, oh, if I can just look at it as this video game, it's like Tetris in 3D, where there's some sort of logic to it. You can kind of predict what's going to happen, but you don't really know. And so nowadays, if there's a fail heading my way, a lot of times I'll be like, well, if it happens, it happens. I'll just go get to the other side of it. I don't freak out as much.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're first dancing in the beginning, especially as a leader, and you're having to keep your balance and you're responsible for your partner and you really are trying not to like bump into anyone.
Yeah.
It's very stressful.
Yeah. I have a total different attitude towards it being too crowded now than 10 years ago when I was a beginner, for sure. Like I like crowded milongas.
Really?
Sometimes. There's a limit. But yeah, sometimes it's kind of nice because it forces you into something smaller. It can add to the dance.
And when you're saying that it adds to the dance, is it like that it forces you to sort of consolidate or deal with more obstacles? Like, is that the thing that's interesting, or does it? Yeah, like what exactly is there that you're enjoying so much?
Yeah, well, I mean, I used to say, honey, I used to say this. I honestly used to say this.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear what this is.
Fear is the most erotic of all the emotions.
Ooh.
I have to admit, it was like a little like shtick that I eventually I picked up because maybe, you know, there was like maybe I scared my partner at the time, just somebody I was dating, and it was like kind of like funny afterwards, and then like that I played that up, you know, to like fear is the most erotic, and it's like,
so yeah,
there's I obviously like right, like
you're a little cringy now.
exactly, right, it's so cringe, and
I like knowing that about you because I don't think I've heard you admit to something about yourself that now makes you kind of cringe a little bit, and you're you know, typically you keep that.
Yeah, I just present myself as a super polished, like, ooh.
Yeah, you like you came out of the womb already packaged and ready to go.
Yeah.
But
no, yeah.
And so this excitement, this fear of the danger.
Right, yeah. So the danger of the dance floor, you know, can I mean, I guess part of me just kind of likes that it's like,
there's something
maybe
at
I'm
stake.
above it, you know. It's like, no, I'm not gonna be phased by this. I'm gonna lean into it. I'm gonna even enjoy it. I'm gonna find a way to make it work for me. And then I think just when it does take you into a smaller space, it's almost like an excuse to kind of go deeper in the dance. And sometimes maybe that sort of blues element, you know, of connection, where it's like very, you know, micro movements. It's kind of easier to do that. Like, I don't know. I get I feel a little strange doing that if it's like a super crowded, or if it's a super open dance floor, you know. It's kind of like, hey, move along, buddy. Like, there's a line of dance, and like this Rhonda wants to rotate, so, you know, get moving.
I think maybe for a lot of people that's uncomfortable because you can only do a few things.
Yeah.
And I know that leaders a lot of times have this anxiety about not being creative enough, not offering enough
for sure
stimulation to the follower. And I think that's highlighted in a small space, because then you can't do a lot of the figures that you learn in class.
Yeah, and for a long time, it's very easy to kind of like, well, I guess I can only do this like rock step and then this ocho cortado into a rock step. But, you know, you do that enough, you kind of start to get bored yourself, and instead of like just fearing that you're boring your partner, then, you know, I can start to think, well, like, all right, what is this music doing? Is there anything different that the violins are doing, you know, during this chorus versus the second chorus?
When you're traveling along a dance floor and the flow is moving, it's like your focus is on the flow. And then when there's no flow, it becomes really frustrating, and you're like, there's no flow. People are not moving. So in that moment, instead of like keeping your attention on that sort of limitation, you then switch your focus to something that gives you movement in a different direction. Yeah. There are certain fails that I consistently have all the time on like a daily basis that are just, I expect them to be there, and they're part of my dance. And I know that that's going to be there. And then there's fails that I've experienced that I hope I never experience again. Sort of my defining fail of my dance career. So
I think I'm gonna write down what that defining fail of your dance career is.
Yeah.
This is like the newlywed game.
I'm curious. Okay, I'm curious about this. All right. So was during a performance.
Was a certain body part shown?
Yes, honey. Yes, you know it. You know
I do
it.
know it.
It's my performance in Portland that I did, and I borrowed this dress that had a high slit, and during the dance, my ass was hanging out. It like literally was hanging out. And people were very kind not to ever mention it or, not to act weird about it. I'm really grateful because I guess I performed at Barratine, so people are very nice there. It was one of those very cringy things.
Yeah.
When I look at that performance now, I cringe a lot. I cringe a lot because I was trying to be someone I wasn't. And that whole look of the female performer in an hourglass shaped dress with the slit in the back and these nice heels, and it's just, I tried it on, and this was my one attempt, I think. And all I could think about when I saw the performance afterwards is just how uneasy I look. I'm just not comfortable in my own skin. And as in a way, I grew up actually with a huge phobia of that happening. And so it just seemed like, wow, like this was the worst possible thing that could have happened. And it did happen. And it made me feel really bad. Like I felt really embarrassed. But at the same time, it was kind of like, well, this is the worst that could happen, and it happened, and I'm done. Like now I don't have to be afraid of it. From then on, like any wardrobe malfunction that happened, it just didn't even faze me because like I don't, somebody actually, there was like a moment where my shirt actually slid down too much. And so part of my nipple showed, and somebody from the sideline saw it. This was like a few years ago at a marathon, and they came up to me and they told me this. They were like, just so you know. I looked at them and I was like, oh, I know. It's okay. That's why I have pasties now. And actually, more importantly, double-sided fashion tape, which is useful both for the fashion and for shoes. I actually used double-sided fashion tape to fix my shoes recently at a festival at SoCal, remember?
Right. Yeah.
The bottom of my shoe was coming off, and I was about to go perform in the finals at SoCal, my shoes falling apart. So I used double-sided fashion tape.
All right.
That's kind of amazing.
On the next Tango Banter, what does your Tango emergency bug out bag contain? Double-sided tape.
Yes.
A shoehorn.
A shoehorn. My God, I can't live without it.
Let's see. This recreation of a video with my partner, and like 3 steps in, I did something off a little bit, and it was like I flung everything out the window. I was just like, I'm just gonna dance it. We did like nothing else.
Really?
And we watched. They played the video beforehand. So people know. People were just so nice. So
you were supposed to, wait, you were supposed to copy part of the sequence.
Right, just about a minute. And then, I was going to perform it with my partner. And
so they were going to play the whole song, but you were going to just copy the first part, the minute, and then the rest of it you would dance your own.
No, I think the performance was just going to be the minute that we.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although that would make sense. I mean, maybe, I don't know. It was just. I think the embarrassing part was that I felt like I gave up really quite a bit. Like that was the thing. I sort of was done with it. I wasn't really.
Done with it, you mean long term, like over the period of working on this piece, or that night?
Right. The course of working on this piece.
Gotcha.
and that night, and in some ways, I'm like, man, I really, the way that I was over it, like I also had a partner, right, and so I did a disservice to my partner and having that attitude, because I don't think that's how she would view it. We'd never sort of discussed it in that way. And so I would only assume that she put all this work in and would have wanted to, like, hey, work through any kind of mistake. If feeling I had was not one that I would want my partner to have. Like I would expect more of my partner, and so I didn't really bring that. So that was always a little bit of an embarrassment.
So the fail was that you gave up.
Yeah.
Is that how you feel?
Yeah. I mean, I messed up, sure, but yeah, the fail really was that.
What do you think was it that you did you not practice it enough, or was it that you were nervous to do it in front of people, or?
Yeah, I mean, we practiced a good amount, but maybe, I mean, you really got to practice until, B- student. It's like, yeah, we got it right that one time, right? You practice until you can't do it wrong, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's kind of also pointing out that that's a natural thing, perhaps, because when I performed my first performance with the partner where I led, it was a very similar thing. It's possible that that's just kind of how it works. I don't know. Maybe we have to go back and revisit this minute-long sequence.
Yeah, maybe actually that would
resurrect it. I'm so curious because I think I know which performance it was that you chose, but I don't know which minute that you were.
From the beginning, it was just.
From the beginning.
Yeah, we just started,
gotcha.
At the beginning of the song.
I think the fails that I experience quite often, which I'm sure other dancers experience as well, is the fail to execute the move you just learned on the dance floor. I might have spent a few hours to a few days working on a piece of vocabulary at home, and it works, and I can teach it to someone else, I can explain it, I can show it, but then I get to the milonga, I'm dancing with somebody new, and I'll time it just right. I'll be like, okay, it's not the first song we're dancing. It's going to be during the third or fourth song. It's in the middle. We're all warmed up, and I'm going to give it a try. And it fails, almost 100% of the time, And I think it's one of those fails that people feel really bad about. They feel really bad that they can't remember or implement vocabulary right away on the social dance floor. But I think that's just part of the process.
I do have one. I don't think I've done this, although again, maybe I haven't. I've blocked it out. But every once in a while, you're dancing, and maybe you've danced after dinner, and it was a great dinner. But it's like when you let one rip.
I mean, that is in that category that's a regular fail for some people, that you might experience that kind of thing at the milonga.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you want to if you could get it out silently, it's fine.
At least make it silent.
But sometimes it can happen where it's audible. That would be that's
embarrassing.
That's a pretty good tango fail. That can happen. So if that's happened, what do you do?
Maybe the fear is that the person has this fear, oh my God, they're not going to dance with me anymore because I farted. I can see myself being kind of paranoid about that.
Well, shit. Well, fortunately, there's lots of people to dance with at a milonga, so
somebody will accept you, farts and all. So I'm curious if our listeners want to share with us any of their epic fails.
I have to say, I'm surprised by some of the things I've admitted to on this.
They might not even make it in the final edit, so our listeners will never know. Thanks for joining us today. If you've made it this far and you haven't yet subscribed to this podcast, I invite you to do so, and check out the private Facebook community link in the show notes if you'd like to join my live banters that I do on Fridays. And if you did enjoy this podcast and you're a fan, would love to get a 5-star review from you on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next week. Ciao.